Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Why No One Plays for Genshin. Today's character is someone I've been looking forward to talking about for a while, but since it took me so long to get to her, I genuinely forgot she existed for a bit. Better late than never though, so let's talk about Naganohara Yoimiya, the best character in the entire game by leaps and bounds. No, I'm not saying that because she's my editor's favorite unit, she's the greatest character in all of Genshin, and I'm totally not being held at gunpoint saying this. If this is your first time watching a Why No One Plays episode, I'd like to first make a quick disclaimer that this is not a personal attack. I'm not disparaging anyone who likes Yoimiya, nor am I saying she's a garbage character that's unusable. The goal of this video is to pinpoint noticeable issues within her design that make her unpopular to use by the general player base. So I'm looking into this from the perspective of those who don't play her or don't want her. Hopefully in doing so, we can find possible ways to fix or improve their gameplay, or perhaps there might be something she has going well for her that not many people know about. By the way, I'm almost positive there'll be people mentioning this in the comments, so I want to bring it up right now. A Reddit user by the name of Party Confetti made a fantastic post dissecting everything wrong with Yoimiya as thoroughly as they could, and a lot of my points referenced theirs. I just want to give a quick shout out since this was compiled with the help of the Yoimiya mains Discord, so without further ado, let's crack open the video. Now, despite lacking popularity, Yoimiya plays a noticeably major role in the Inazuma storyline. Without spoiling too much, she can be described as your typical civil disobedience character, someone who opposes the established order but does so very discreetly, such as smuggling refugees and whatnot. Aside from that, she would probably be very close friends with Klee, given that they both have a fascination for making the big booms. She even has her own little side story quest that you're required to complete alongside Ayaka's before progressing through the next part of the Archon quest. Some may have seen it as tedious filler, but I actually thought those two were important to establish a lot of world building. It helps us get to know what's going on in their daily lives. In Yoimiya's case, she's a town favorite and gets along with the locals on a familial level. Character-wise, she's very much like Amber in many ways. Hardworking and earnest with a spring in her step, and she has a very pure-hearted look on life even amidst the cold realities of the Vision Hunt decree. It's safe to say she's a very memorable character, checking off one of the two biggest contributors to a character's popularity. That just leaves us with the other, gameplay. Similarly to Yanfei, Yoimiya's introduction came at the tail end of the massive wave of Pyro and Cryo units, and by that point, the player base was understandably fatigued by the lack of roster diversity. Ayaka was able to meet great success on account of being known long since beta, and she's currently the best melee cryo unit in the game. So the community was able to overlook the fact that she was another cryo character amidst the sheer number we've had up until that point. Yoimiya had to face the same oversaturation at the other end of the Icy Hot, so the deck was stacked against her from the beginning. While there were jokes made about her being a more expensive version of Amber, what with them both being Pyro Bow users, Amber's usefulness, or lack thereof, was established long before that point, and there was a good amount of curiosity as to whether or not Yoimiya would continue the trend of 5-star bow users being pretty top-notch. She definitely had the opportunity to make a big first impression. Looking back, it missed the mark, literally. Right at the gate, it was made painfully clear that Yoimiya's impetuous, ready-fire-aim disposition carried over to her performance in combat. Unlike the other 5-star bow users who load most of their power in charge shots, elemental skills, and bursts, Yoimiya's primary source of pressure lies in her normal attacks. She's designed for consistent damage as opposed to burst, which seems to be a running trend for a lot of pyro units in this series. Out of all bow users, Yoimiya has the highest base damage scaling in her normal attacks, capping out at almost 200% at level 11 on the last hit. Something else to make note of is the damage disparity from hits 1 and 2 to hits 3 and 5, jumping from 130 all the way to 167. It may not seem like much when you pit it against the raw power of elemental bursts, but for a normal attack these numbers are quite impressive, not even a charged attack. Yoimiya does actually have a multi-charge attack just like Ganyu, but for the most part this is for added flavor. Nothing in her repertoire incentivizes her to use that over her normal hits. So I went over this in further detail in my video on Catalyst, but when it comes to range attacks in Genshin, they're notorious for having ambiguous range and poor usability. Bows and catalysts automatically lock onto the nearest possible target, shooting in their direction. There's presently no popular range indicator for ranged weapons, and more importantly, no way for you to decide who your character targets. Bow units are able to circumvent this by switching to aim shot mode, assuming a third-person shooter point of view, which lets them stray side to side without changing the direction they're facing. Though that being said, Child straight up switches to melee with Raging Tides, and Venti is for the most part a quick swapper. Because Yoimiya is the only 5-star bow user who uses normal attacks for the bulk of her damage, she's at the mercy of the game's frustratingly inconsistent auto-targeting. It's very possible for her to straight up miss all of her attacks if she's up against a moving target. And trust me, there's no shortage of clips where she even misses Hilichurls and Slimes. It's not just her auto attacks either. Ryukin's Saxifrage is also prone to completely whiffing because unlike other bursts which cover a large area, this one's a projectile that has an extremely small hitbox, essentially meaning it will only hit one target. Her elemental burst locks onto one enemy on cast, meaning if they change position during her animation, it just misses. And there's no explosion on contact either like Ganyu's Frostflake Arrow. Much of this issue can be resolved by simply giving Bow and Catalyst auto attacks heat-seeking properties so that they follow their target no matter what. Yoimiya can rack up serious damage, but all the damage in the world means nothing if your shots don't connect. Speaking of damage, let's look into just why her normal attacks are some of the strongest in the game. On top of her high base damage, she has several things that boost her combat pressure. Niwabi Fire Dance is a 10-second buff to herself that imbues her with Pyro on hit and causes them to deal bonus damage. At level 13, if I'm reading this correctly, she's supposed to do 70% bonus damage with each hit. Or rather, her attacks are modified to deal up to 170% as normal damage, as it doesn't explicitly say bonus damage the way Xiao's ultimate does. Even so, that's pretty insane. Although when I was doing research for the video, apparently a Yoimiya with a level 10 normal attack and level 1 skill and burst talents outdamages a Yoimiya with an 888 spread. I don't know how conclusive that is, so if anyone can clarify in the comments, that'd be appreciated. Moving on, her talents and constellations are also conducive to making her autos hurt more. Tricks of the Troublemaker provides her a stacking pyro damage bonus with every auto attack while Niwabi Fire Dance is active. Naganohara Meteor Swarm, her C6, increases her normal attack damage through rekindling arrows, which stem from her aim shot charge level 2, and her other non-3 talent constellations increase her attack, pyro damage, and uptime by a considerable amount. Make no mistake, Yoimiya has a lot of potential firepower in her kit. Due to its damage distribution, much of her strength is backloaded, requiring you to go through her entire 5-hit animation. In other words, if you so much as sprint, jump, get staggered, your entire combo resets, and with how bow users have some of the worst endurance out of any weapon type, Yoimiya has to put herself in tremendous danger if she wants to tap into her damage. Without the assistance of a heavy shield user like Zhongli, Yoimiya is prone to getting staggered a lot, and she doesn't step back far enough with the normal rotation. She has to reposition. Barring attack speed modifiers, it takes her 3 seconds to get to her final auto attack. That's 3 seconds you have to stand still for. A lot can happen in 3 seconds. Melee units naturally don't have this issue as many of them use their charge attacks anyway. There's also something about a burst that makes absolutely no sense. It marks the primary target with Aura's Blaze, which explodes for a good amount of pyro damage when the target receives further damage by her party members. The burst damage on Ryukin's Saxifrage, contrary to its very flashy animation, is complete garbage. The real damage comes from the mark, which can proc every 2 seconds or so for up to 5 times, or 7 times the C1. But the condition is that she herself is unable to proc her own skill. Okay, something I noticed about MiHoYo, Cognosphere, or Hoyoverse, whatever they call themselves now, is that they add in these strange restrictions with the intent to prevent a character from becoming too strong. They made Klee's burst disappear when she swapped out, when it could have been fantastic in making her a sub-DPS. They made Kokomi's attacks essentially lose the ability to crit, something that's not really made up by the bonus damage from her health and healing bonus. They made Xinyan's scaling awkwardly split between attack and defense, all because they thought if they didn't have those limiters, they'd be crazy overpowered. But most of the time, they wouldn't even have been overpowered in the first place. Yoimiya's elemental burst is one of the worst in the game according to her own player base. There was absolutely zero reason for her to not be allowed to proc her own mark. Now you could argue that in almost every situation you would be swapping between your party members anyway. True, rarely do you ever want to stay on one unit for more than, I don't know, like 8 seconds. In that case, it's all the more reason why this restriction should not exist at all. It's an inconvenience more than a form of skill expression, and the payoff isn't even well worth it. As a comparison, let's look at Eula's Glacial Illumination. The burst damage in and of itself is okay. Not great, but it's serviceable. The real kicker is from her Lightfall Sword, which gives her 7 seconds to attack up to 30 times, increasing the potential damage each time. I'm pretty sure it's impossible to get all 30 stacks fast enough, but if hypothetically you somehow pull it off, Eula's Elemental Burst can dish out, and I'm not even kidding, over 6,500% physical damage. You just saw a clip of her doing almost 5.5 million damage in one hit. Yoimiya is another unfortunate soul that loses a lot of viability for no particular reason whatsoever. It doesn't quote-unquote balance the character, it just makes them feel very unsatisfying to play. At a glance, one might assume that this is an opportunity for her to be a good sub-DPS. In theory, yes, Yoimiya does have a good amount of party support such as the bonus attack from Summer Night's Dawn and the Aura's Blaze. But ask yourself this, would you rather have that, or would you rather have Bennett or Xianling? Yoimiya effectively is restricted to pure auto attack damage, and again, to her credit, she does a lot. 45% bonus pyro damage from C2 and past the talents. Niwabi Fire Dance boosts her auto attack damage even further, and on top of that, she has very high base damage numbers. She's more than capable of whooping ass with the rest of them. There's just so many things about her that make it harder to do so, many of which should have been fixed before her release. The problems don't end there though. Her kit is virtually devoid of area coverage. As you already know, normal attacks from bows can only strike one target at a time, even charge attacks for that matter. The only reason Ganyu is so good is because her Frostflake arrows explode to deal AoE damage. Yoimiya's skill is a buff, it's not a damaging ability. That leaves just her Elemental Burst, which as I mentioned before has a very small hitbox. It's almost impossible for you to hit more than one target. Bow users heavily depend on their Elemental Burst for the majority of their AoE damage. Ganyu, Venti, Aloy, and Child all have humongous ultimates. Lack of any semblance of mopping capabilities means she's an infinitely worse choice for main DPS for any situation that isn't just fighting a single enemy. I may be mistaken, but she might very well be the only character in the game period who is exclusively single target. I'm pretty sure everyone else has area damage in some way, shape, or form. Someone else brought it up, and I think it's pretty funny. She's a fireworks maker with no AoE damage. You would think a firework is a massive explosion. This wouldn't be too much of an issue if her single target damage was so ridiculously high to offset this, and like I said, with the right support and setup, she can very easily deliver. But it beggars belief, why would you choose her over someone who can do similar damage, but to everyone around them, not just the one standing in front? Yoimiya overall is just a walking inconsistency. Her auto attacks have inconsistent accuracy, her elemental burst is inconsistent timings, her DPS, while potentially high, is inconsistent. Her own talents are inconsistent. Summer Night's Dawn affects her teammates but not her. Aura's Blaze can only be triggered by allies, not her. Now fortunately, most if not all her problems can be addressed with external help. Anyone who provides a shield can lessen the need for her to reset her combo, especially if you have Zhongli. There is no one who wants the Geodaddy more than her. Lack of area coverage is manageable. Anyone with persisting effects like Kazuha, Xingqiu, maybe Shangli. If you're surrounded by a bunch of small fry, then your supports can do all the work for you. Or you could spam the crap out of Overload if you like with Fischl and Beidou. On a side note, Yoimiya loves Xingqiu. If there was no internal cooldown in this game and you could chain Vaporize one after another, Yoimiya would get a massive indirect buff, as she can chain Vaporize with Xingqiu almost perfectly. I say almost because, you know, she still misses. But if you're concerned about accuracy, you could just get a team that holds enemies in place like Venti or Zhongli. She has workarounds, so it's not completely unsalvageable, but again, therein lies the same issue that plagues every unit in this series. Why bother? That's what pisses me off so much about a lot of these characters. These restrictions have no place in the game. Getting rid of them won't suddenly make Yoimiya the best unit in the game. It will simply designate her as a side grade. If you're not a fan of using Hu Tao, then no worries, you can use Yoimiya. That's the ideal scenario, and it's how things are between Ayaka and Ganyu at the moment. Both of them are top tier, despite both being cryo units. The nuances in their gameplay allow for a player to decide if they want to employ one or the other. And since Spiral Abyss mandates two parties, what's wrong with having multiple strong Pyro, Cryo, Electro, Geo, Hydro, etc.? It's always good to make sure players have different options to consider. And on the subject of restrictions, a lot of Yoimiyas can be easily fixed. Addressing her problems with auto-targeting is a very elementary task. Genshin was made in Unity. I'm not the best at game programming relative to some of my classmates back in school, but I could probably figure this out in like 20 minutes. Same goes for her Aura's Blaze and second passive talent. It's as simple as checking a box. The more Why No One Plays episodes I make, the more it boggles my mind as to why they do things like this. Most of Kuching's problems are oversights, right? She functions perfectly fine, it's just that it would be nice if she had a bit more. But stuff like Yoimiya are conscious decisions. The developers have to intentionally code the game to be like this. Yoimiya is not a weak character. She's not like Yanfei, who just doesn't have the damage to compete. She has more than enough damage, but she can't even access it herself. It just makes no sense. You know what? Writing this video gave me a good idea for another one. I should make a video on incomplete characters. There are far too many units in the game that are broken on a fundamental level. I'm gonna do that next. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today. This one was a little ranty, but whenever I do research for one of these episodes, I try to look for silver linings or redeeming factors that can incentivize players to give her a second chance. And then I run into so many of these design choices that are just so confounding to me. There's no rhyme or reason for them to be like this. It's like designing a car that can't drive backwards. But regardless, hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and checking out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon in the next episode. Take care.